She was mocked for her old dress, until the millionaire held her hand and said, "You're perfect. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together." Chapter 1. The Assistant Who Dreamed in Colors. Kelly Carter had always believed that Monday mornings tasted like burnt coffee and unfulfilled promises. Standing in the narrow kitchen of her Crown Heights apartment, she watched steam rise from her chipped ceramic mug, a graduation gift from her younger sister Mia 3 years ago. The morning light filtered through gauze curtains, casting soft shadows across the small but carefully arranged space. Everything had its place: vintage books stacked on floating shelves, a single orchid on the windowsill, and photographs of her family arranged on the refrigerator like a constellation of love. At 26, Kelly had learned to find beauty in simplicity. Her deep brown skin glowed in the morning light, and her natural hair was pulled back in a neat, low bun that framed her delicate features. She wore a cream-colored blouse, pressed to perfection, and black slacks that she'd owned for 2 years but still looked professional. Working as an executive assistant at Sturt Interiors, Kelly Carter didn't have much, but what she had, she treasured. Her phone buzzed against the marble-patterned countertop. Adrian Sturt calling. Kelly's heart did that familiar flutter, part professional anxiety, part something she didn't dare name. Even his name on her phone screen carried weight. She cleared her throat twice before answering. "Good morning, Mr. Sturt." "Kelly." His voice was crisp, authoritative, yet there was something softer in the way he said her name. "I need you to review the Morrison project files before the 10 o'clock meeting. And could you confirm Mrs. Williams's appointment for Thursday?" "Already done, sir. Mrs. Williams confirmed for 2 p.m., and I've prepared a summary of the Morrison revisions. They're on your desk." A pause. Kelly could hear the faint sound of traffic through his phone. He was probably in his car heading to their Midtown office. "Of course they are," Adrian said, and she could almost hear the hint of a smile. "What would I do without you, Ms. Carter?" The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Kelly felt her cheeks warm. "Is there anything else you need, Mr. Sturt?" "Actually, yes. There's an event tonight, the Metropolitan Design Gala. I need someone from our team there to represent Sturt Interiors. Normally I'd send Patricia, but she's handling the Boston client emergency." Kelly's stomach dropped. She'd heard about the Metropolitan Design Gala. It was the industry's most prestigious event, where million-dollar deals were made over champagne and architectural dreams were born between dance sets. I don't think I'm the right person for—" "You are." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "You know our projects better than anyone except me. You understand what we stand for." Kelly stared at her reflection in the kitchen window. The confident woman staring back seemed like a stranger. "Sir, I don't have the right clothes for something like that. It's not really my world." Another pause, longer this time. "Kelly," Adrian said, his voice gentler now, "you've been my assistant for 2 years. In that time, you've never missed a deadline, never failed to anticipate what I needed, and never once complained about the impossible hours I sometimes ask of you. You think I don't notice, but I do." She gripped the phone tighter. "You see details others miss. You remember Mrs. Rodriguez likes her coffee with exactly 1 sugar cube, not 2. You know that Mr. Davidson always wants his blueprints printed on cream paper because it reminds him of his architecture school days. You understand people, Kelly. That's worth more than any expensive dress." Kelly closed her eyes, feeling the familiar war between fear and ambition waging in her chest. "The event starts at 8, Adrian continued. "I'll have my driver pick you up at 7:30. "Mr. Sturt, I really don't—" "Kelly," he said her name like a gentle command. "Trust me." The line went quiet, except for the soft hum of city noise. "Okay," she whispered, surprising herself. "I'll be ready." "Good, and Kelly?" "Yes, sir?" "Wear whatever makes you feel like yourself." After he hung up, Kelly stood in her kitchen for a long moment, staring at the phone. Adrian Sturt was a mystery wrapped in expensive suits and perfect posture. At 37, he'd built Sturt Interiors from a one-man operation into one of New York's most sought-after design firms. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that always looked effortlessly styled and green eyes that seemed to notice everything. His presence filled rooms, commanded attention, made clients feel like their dreams were possible. But in their 2 years of working together, Kelly had glimpsed something else beneath the CEO facade. The way he remembered her birthday with a simple but elegant card, how he always made sure she left before 8 p.m., even when he stayed past midnight. The quiet "thank you" he offered when he thought no one was listening. Kelly walked to her bedroom closet and pushed aside her work clothes, searching for something, anything appropriate for a Metropolitan Design gala. Her fingers stopped on a familiar fabric, her mother's dress. It hung in the back corner, wrapped in tissue paper like a precious secret. Kelly hadn't worn it since her mother's memorial service 3 years ago. The dress was simple, navy blue with small pearl buttons down the front, elegant in its understated way. Her mother, Diane Carter, had worn it to every important event in her life: Kelly's high school graduation, her own promotion to head nurse, family weddings. "It's not about the dress, baby girl," her mother had always said. "It's about how you wear it." Kelly pulled the dress from its protective wrapping and held it against herself in the mirror. It would fit perfectly. She and her mother had shared the same petite frame. But could she really wear her mother's dress to meet millionaires and Manhattan elite? Her phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number. Ms. Carter, this is James, Mr. Sturt's driver. I'll be outside your building at 7:30 p.m. sharp. Looking forward to meeting you." Kelly set the phone down and looked at herself in the mirror again. The woman staring back looked scared but determined. "Okay, Mama," she whispered to her reflection. "Let's see what happens when I trust him." Outside her window, New York City hummed with possibility, and somewhere in a glass tower in Midtown, Adrian Sturt was probably reviewing contracts and designing spaces that would make people feel at home. Neither of them knew that tonight would change everything. But Kelly Carter was about to learn that sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen when you have the courage to remain exactly who you are. The Sturt Interiors office buzzed with its usual controlled chaos, but Kelly felt like she was moving through water. Every conversation seemed to pause when she walked by. Patricia Wilson, the senior project manager, glanced up from her computer with raised eyebrows. "So, you're really going tonight?" she asked, not bothering to hide her surprise. Kelly adjusted the stack of contracts in her arms. "Mr. Sturt asked me to represent the company." "Interesting choice," Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular tone that made Kelly's shoulders tense. "The Met Gala is, well, it's not exactly a learning experience, it's where real business happens." Before Kelly could respond, Marcus Henderson, one of the junior designers, appeared with his usual warm smile. "Hey, don't listen to her," he said quietly. "Adrian knows what he's doing. He wouldn't send you if he didn't trust you completely." Marcus was Kelly's closest friend at the office, a talented black designer from Atlanta who understood the subtle navigation required in spaces like Sturt Interiors. He'd been her anchor during difficult days, celebrating her small victories and reminding her that she belonged here. "But what if I mess up?" Kelly whispered. "What if I say the wrong thing to the wrong person?" "Kelly," Marcus put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've been managing Adrian's impossible schedule for 2 years. You've handled temperamental clients, impossible deadlines, and you somehow make everyone feel heard. You think a fancy party is going to break you?" Before she could answer, the elevator chimed and Adrian stepped out. The office atmosphere shifted immediately. Adrian Sturt had that effect, not because he was intimidating, but because his presence commanded natural respect. Today he wore a charcoal grey suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and confident stride. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and those green eyes seemed to take in everything at once. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice carrying easily across the open floor plan. His gaze found Kelly's, and she felt that familiar flutter in her chest. "Miss Carter, could I see you in my office?" Kelly's stomach dropped. Patricia shot her a meaningful look that said, "See what I mean?" Adrian's office was a study in controlled elegance, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, a sleek desk that probably cost more than Kelly's annual rent, and architectural models that looked like tiny cities of dreams. But what always struck Kelly was how lived-in it felt. Family photos on his bookshelf, a coffee mug with a small chip on the handle, books with actual bookmarks and notes in the margins. "Close the door," Adrian said, settling behind his desk. Kelly's heart hammered. Had he changed his mind about tonight? "Sir, if this is about the gala—" "It's not." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those impossibly green eyes. "Well, not directly. Kelly, in the 2 years you've worked here, have I ever given you reason to doubt my judgment?" "No, sir." "Then why are you doubting it now?" The question hung between them. Kelly twisted her hands in her lap, searching for words. "It's not about doubting you," she said finally. "It's about... I know who I am, Mr. Sturt. I'm good at organizing your calendar, managing client communications, making sure your coffee is exactly right. But tonight, I'm going to be surrounded by people who vacation in places I've only seen in magazines. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Tell me something, he said. When Mrs. Rodriguez was upset about the delays on her daughter's wedding venue, who calmed her down? I did, but when the Morrison account was falling apart because they felt like we didn't understand their vision, who spent 3 hours on the phone with them until they felt heard? That was just... And when David Chen brought his 8-year-old son to the office last month, and the boy was having a meltdown, who got down on the floor and helped him build a castle out of office supplies? Kelly felt her cheeks warm. He was scared. His parents were arguing about the renovation costs. Exactly. Adrian leaned forward. You didn't see a disruption to the workday. You saw a frightened child who needed someone to care. That's who you are, Kelly. You see people, really see them, in a way that most people in our industry have forgotten how to do. He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The Metropolitan Design Gala isn't about expensive dresses or knowing which fork to use first. It's about connecting with people who dream of beautiful spaces, and nobody I know does that better than you. Kelly felt something shift in her chest, not confidence exactly, but maybe the possibility of it. What if I embarrass you? She asked quietly. Adrian turned from the window, and when their eyes met, Kelly felt like he could see straight through her carefully constructed professional facade. Kelly, he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it, you could never embarrass me. If anything, I'm worried about the opposite. What do you mean? I mean that tonight people are going to see what I see every day, and some of them might try to poach you. Kelly blinked, certain she'd misheard. Poach me? You're brilliant, Kelly. You just don't know it yet. The words hung in the air between them, charged with something Kelly didn't dare name. Adrian cleared his throat and returned to his desk, the professional mask sliding back into place. James will pick you up at 7:30, he said, his voice back to its usual authoritative tone. The event starts at 8, but fashionably late is perfectly acceptable. I'll be there by 8:15. Yes, sir. Kelly turned to leave, but Adrian's voice stopped her at the door. Kelly? Yes? Wear whatever makes you feel like yourself. That's all anyone ever needs to be. Back at her desk, Kelly tried to focus on her tasks, but her mind kept replaying the conversation. You're brilliant, Kelly. You just don't know it yet. Marcus appeared at her cubicle with 2 cups of coffee. You look like you've seen a ghost. He believes in me, Kelly said quietly, accepting the coffee gratefully. Of course he does. Adrian Sturt doesn't do anything without a reason. He sees potential in you that maybe you haven't seen in yourself yet. Kelly's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Mia. Good luck tonight. Mama would be so proud. Send pictures. Looking at the message, Kelly felt a familiar ache. Their mother, Diane, had always believed that Kelly was destined for something special. You have a gift for making people feel safe, she used to say. That's rarer than you think, baby girl. Maybe it was time to trust that gift. As the afternoon wore on, Kelly found herself stealing glances at Adrian through his office windows. He was in meetings most of the day, but occasionally their eyes would meet, and he'd offer that small, private smile that made her wonder if there was more to this invitation than professional representation. At 5 o'clock, Adrian emerged from his final meeting of the day. See you tonight, Ms. Carter, he said as he passed her desk. See you tonight, Mr. Sturt. But as she watched him walk toward the elevator, Kelly couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would change everything between them, and she still wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her more. Kelly stood in front of her bedroom mirror at 6:30, holding her mother's dress like it might dissolve if she gripped it too tightly. The navy blue fabric felt soft between her fingers, cotton with just enough silk to catch the light beautifully. The pearl buttons gleamed like tiny moons, each one sewn on with the careful precision that characterized everything Diane Carter had ever touched. Kelly remembered watching her mother get ready for important events, how she'd hum softly while fastening each button, as if the ritual itself was sacred. What do you think, Mama? Kelly whispered to the empty room. Am I crazy for doing this? Her phone rang, interrupting the moment of quiet communion with her mother's memory. Kelly! Mia's voice burst through the speaker, bright and excited. Please tell me you're not chickening out. Kelly smiled despite her nerves. At 23, Mia was everything Kelly sometimes wished she could be. Bold, unapologetic, endlessly optimistic. She was finishing her nursing degree at Columbia, following in their mother's footsteps, but with her own fierce determination. I'm getting dressed right now, Kelly said, settling the phone on her dresser and putting it on speaker. Good. Now describe everything. What are you wearing? Please tell me you didn't buy something boring. Kelly held up the dress. I'm wearing Mama's navy dress, the one with the pearl buttons. Silence on the other end of the line. Mia? Oh, Kelly. Her sister's voice was soft now, touched with emotion. That's perfect. Mama wore that dress to my high school graduation, remember? She said it was her confidence dress. I remember. Kelly's throat felt tight. Do you think I'm being silly? Wearing something so simple to such a fancy event? Are you kidding me? Mia's voice regained its strength. Kelly, you're going to walk into that room carrying every woman in our family who ever had to prove she belonged somewhere. Mama, Grandma Rose, Great-Aunt Coretta, who integrated that hospital in Atlanta. You're not just wearing a dress, you're wearing legacy. Kelly felt tears prick her eyes. What if I don't measure up? To who? Kelly, listen to me. Mia's voice took on that stern tone she used when her older sister was being particularly stubborn. You've been working for one of New York's most successful design firms for 2 years. Your boss, who, by the way, sounds gorgeous and totally into you, personally chose you for this event. You speak 3 languages, you have perfect organizational skills, and you make the best coffee on the East Coast. What exactly are you not measuring up to? Kelly laughed softly. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best, Mia said. Now put on that dress and call me when you get home. I want to hear everything. After they hung up, Kelly carefully slipped into the dress. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The navy blue complemented her deep brown skin beautifully, and the simple cut emphasized her natural grace. She left her hair in its natural state, styled in soft curls that framed her face, and applied minimal makeup, just enough to highlight her warm brown eyes and smooth complexion. For jewelry, she chose her mother's small gold hoop earrings and a delicate gold chain that had been a gift from her grandmother. Simple, elegant, meaningful. Kelly was fastening the last button when her phone buzzed. James, driver. Good evening, Miss Carter. I'm downstairs whenever you're ready. No rush at all. Kelly took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back looked nervous but determined, elegant in her simplicity. She grabbed her small black purse, another inheritance from her mother, and headed downstairs. James turned out to be a distinguished black man in his 50s, with kind eyes and an immediate smile. He opened the car door with a flourish. Miss Carter, I'm James. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you, James. I'm a little nervous. About meeting fancy people or about seeing Mr. Sturt outside the office? James asked with a knowing twinkle in his eye as he pulled into Manhattan traffic. Kelly felt her cheeks warm. Is it that obvious? Ma'am, I've been driving Mr. Sturt for 5 years. I've never seen him personally ensure someone had a ride to an event, send 3 follow-up texts about timing, or ask me twice if the car was clean enough. James glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Whatever you've done to impress him, it's working. We just have a good working relationship, Kelly said, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice. James said with a smile. That's why he specifically asked me to tell you that you look beautiful tonight, even before I picked you up. Kelly's heart stopped. He said that? His exact words were, James, please make sure Miss Carter knows that she'll be the most elegant woman there tonight. Then he made me repeat it back to him, to make sure I got it right. Kelly stared out the window at the glittering lights of Manhattan, trying to process this information. Adrian had anticipated her nerves, had tried to give her confidence even before she left her apartment. James, can I ask you something? Of course. What's he really like? Mr. Sturt, I mean, when he's not being the CEO. James was quiet for a moment, navigating through the evening traffic. Mr. Sturt is a good man who's forgotten how to let people see it, he said finally. He's been successful for so long that he's built walls to protect himself, but lately, especially since you started working for him, I've seen glimpses of who he used to be. He smiles more, laughs occasionally, asks about my grandchildren. They stopped at a red light and James turned to look at her directly. People like Mr. Sturt don't usually notice people like us, Miss Carter. The fact that he sees you, really sees you, that means something. As they approached the Metropolitan Museum, Kelly could see the red carpet, the photographers, the stream of elegantly dressed people flowing into the building. Her stomach clenched. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Yes, you can, James said firmly. You know why? Because you're not trying to be someone else tonight. You're just being yourself, and that's the most powerful thing any woman can do. He pulled up to the entrance, and Kelly could see Adrian waiting near the steps. Even from a distance he was striking, tall and commanding in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair catching the lights from the museum's facade. When he saw the car, his entire demeanor changed, softening into something approaching nervousness. James came around to open her door. "Remember, Ms. Carter, you belong here tonight. Not because of where you work or who invited you, but because of who you are." Kelly stepped out of the car, her mother's dress flowing around her like liquid courage, and Adrian Sturt's face transformed into something she'd never seen before. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Adrian forgot how to breathe. Kelly stepped out of the car like grace incarnate, her navy dress catching the museum's golden lights in a way that made her seem to glow from within. The simplicity of her outfit was stunning, elegant in its restraint, beautiful in its authenticity. While other women arrived dripping in designer gowns and jewelry that cost more than most people's cars, Kelly Carter looked like she belonged in a different category entirely. Timeless. "Mr. Sturt?" Kelly's voice was soft, uncertain as she approached him on the museum steps. Adrian realized he'd been staring. "Kelly." Her name came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat. You look absolutely beautiful." A soft blush colored her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." It was such a simple comment, but the way she said it, with genuine warmth rather than the calculated flattery he was used to, made something shift in his chest. "Shall we?" Adrian offered his arm, trying to ignore the electricity that shot through him when her hand settled in the crook of his elbow. The Metropolitan Museum's Great Hall had been transformed into a wonderland of architectural design. Suspended installations created floating cities of light, while projection mapping turned the walls into living blueprints that shifted and evolved. The who's who of New York's design and social elite mingled beneath soaring ceilings, their conversations a symphony of ambition and influence. Kelly's grip on his arm tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's overwhelming," she murmured, her eyes wide as she took in the spectacle. "It is," Adrian agreed, surprised by his own honesty. "I've been coming to these events for years, and I still feel like I'm performing sometimes." Kelly looked up at him with surprise. "Really? But you seem so natural in environments like this." "That's the secret," Adrian said, leading her toward the cocktail area. "Everyone here is performing. The trick is remembering that underneath all the expensive clothes and practiced conversation, we're all just people trying to figure out if we belong." Before Kelly could respond, a familiar voice cut through the ambient noise. "Adrian, there you are, darling." Camille Whitman materialized beside them like a perfectly sculpted storm system. At 42, she was one of Manhattan's most successful interior designers, and according to the society pages, Adrian's most persistent romantic pursuit. Her platinum blonde hair was swept into an elaborate updo, and her silver gown probably cost more than Kelly's annual salary. "Camille," Adrian said politely, "you know Kelly Carter from my office." Camille's blue eyes swept over Kelly with the precision of a security scanner. "Of course, the assistant." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "How interesting that you brought your staff tonight, Adrian." Kelly felt her shoulders tense, but before she could respond, Adrian's voice cut through the air with deadly quiet authority. "Kelly is here as my personal guest and as a representative of Sturt Interiors. She knows our work better than anyone." Something in his tone made Camille's calculated smile falter slightly. "Of course," Camille said, but her eyes remained fixed on Kelly's dress with barely concealed disdain. "What a unique choice of outfit. Very vintage." "It's beautiful," Adrian said firmly, his hand moving to rest protectively at the small of Kelly's back. "Authenticity is rare at these events." The touch sent warmth spreading through Kelly's entire body, but she could feel Camille's hostility like ice water. "Well," Camille said, her voice honey-sweet with venom, "I suppose we all have different definitions of appropriate attire for professional events." Kelly felt her confidence, so carefully built up by Mia's words and James's kindness, begin to crumble. Camille was everything she wasn't: polished, connected, born into this world of privilege and power. "Excuse me," Kelly said quietly, "I should check on something." She pulled away from Adrian's touch and headed toward the restroom, needing space to breathe. Behind her, she heard Adrian's voice, sharp with authority. "Camille, that was completely unnecessary." "Oh, please, Adrian. I'm just looking out for you. That girl is completely out of her depth here." Kelly pushed through the restroom door, grateful for the momentary quiet. She stared at herself in the ornate mirror, trying to recapture the confidence she'd felt in her apartment. But Camille's words echoed in her head. Out of her depth, inappropriate attire, just the assistant. The door opened, and another woman entered. Someone Kelly didn't recognize. elegant in her 50s with kind eyes. "You know," the woman said, approaching the mirror to touch up her lipstick, "I couldn't help but overhear that interaction out there. Camille Whitman has always been threatened by authentic beauty." Kelly looked up, surprised. "I'm sorry. The way that man looked at you when you walked in?" The woman smiled. "Honey, I've been married for 30 years, and my husband has never looked at me like that. Don't let some bitter woman convince you that you don't belong." She capped her lipstick and turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, your dress is exquisite. Real elegance doesn't need to scream for attention." Alone again, Kelly took a deep breath. She thought about her mother, about the legacy Mia had reminded her she carried, about Adrian's words, "You could never embarrass me." When she emerged from the restroom, she found Adrian waiting in the hallway, his face creased with concern. "Kelly, I'm so sorry about Camille. She was completely out of line." "It's okay," Kelly said, though they both knew it wasn't. "No, it's not." Adrian stepped closer, and Kelly could see genuine anger in his green eyes. "You don't deserve to be treated like that. Ever." "She's not wrong, though," Kelly said quietly. "I'm just an assistant. This isn't my world." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he did something that surprised them both. He reached out and gently tucked a curl behind her ear. "Kelly," he said softly, "do you know why I really asked you to come tonight?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "To represent the company." "No." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I asked you to come because for 2 years you've been the best part of every single day, because you see people, really see them in a way that makes them feel valued. Because when you smile, it changes the entire energy of a room." Kelly felt her breath catch. "I asked you to come because I wanted to see you in a place where your light could shine, without fluorescent office lighting dimming it. And right now, looking at you in your mother's dress, representing everything real and genuine in a room full of pretense, you're the most beautiful woman here." Before Kelly could respond, the lights dimmed, and a voice announced that dinner was about to be served. Adrian offered his arm again. "Shall we show them what authentic elegance looks like?" This time, when Kelly took his arm, she felt different, not because she was trying to be someone else, but because someone she respected saw exactly who she was and found it beautiful. But as they walked back into the main hall, Kelly noticed Camille watching them with narrowed eyes, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was just beginning. The dinner tables were arranged like a constellation of power and influence, each one carefully curated to maximize networking potential and social hierarchy. Kelly found herself seated between Adrian and Dr. Harrison Miles, a distinguished architect in his 60s who had designed half of Manhattan's most iconic buildings. Across from her sat Camille, who had somehow maneuvered herself into their table with the precision of a chess grandmaster. "So, Kelly," Dr. Miles said warmly as the first course was served, "Adrian tells me you're the genius behind keeping his impossible schedule organized. That's no small feat. I've tried to book meetings with him for months." Kelly felt a flutter of gratitude toward Adrian for the introduction. "Dr. Miles, I actually studied your work in college. The Meridian Tower was part of my thesis on sustainable urban design." Dr. Miles's eyebrows shot up with genuine surprise. "You studied architecture?" "Interior design, actually. I have a degree from Parsons, but I focused on how architectural elements influence emotional well-being in living spaces." "Fascinating." Dr. Miles leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "And what was your conclusion about the Meridian Tower?" Kelly felt the table's attention shift to her, including Camille's sharp focus. But Adrian's encouraging nod gave her confidence. "Your use of natural light wells creates these beautiful transitional spaces that help people decompress as they move from public to private areas. It's brilliant psychology translated into architecture." Dr. Miles smiled broadly. "My dear, you're the first person in years to understand what I was actually trying to achieve. Most people just comment on the glass facade." From across the table, Camille interjected with honeyed venom. "How wonderful that you had time to study architecture while working as an assistant. I imagine that keeps you quite busy. Both jobs." The table went quiet. Kelly felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Adrian's voice cut through the tension. "Kelly graduated summa cum laude while working 2 jobs to pay for school. She also speaks 3 languages fluently and has an eye for spatial design that rivals anyone in this room." "3 languages?" Dr. Miles asked, impressed. "English, Spanish, and French," Kelly said quietly, still processing Adrian's public defense of her credentials. "Remarkable," Dr. Miles said. "And Adrian's right about the spatial design. I saw the photos of his office renovation last year. The way you incorporated those living elements into a corporate space was inspired. Kelly blinked in surprise. You know about that. My dear, that project was featured in Architectural Digest. They credited the innovative integration of biophilic design principles. Was that your work? Kelly glanced at Adrian, who was watching her with something that looked like pride. Yes. I suggested the vertical gardens and the water feature. Mr. Sturt gave me free rein to experiment. Because, Adrian said, his voice warm, Kelly sees spaces the way most people see people. She understands their potential. Camille's smile was becoming more strained by the minute. How lovely. Though I have to ask, Kelly, don't you find it limiting working in someone else's vision rather than developing your own client base? It was a subtle attack disguised as a career question, but Kelly felt its bite. Before she could formulate a response, an unexpected voice joined the conversation. "Excuse me," said Elena Rodriguez, a renowned developer who'd been quietly listening from the next seat over. "I couldn't help but overhear. Are you the Kelly Carter who designed the community center project in Washington Heights last year?" Kelly's breath caught. How do you know about that?" "My daughter volunteers there. She can't stop talking about how the design makes everyone feel welcome. Children, elderly, people with disabilities. She said it's the first public space she's been in where every detail seems to consider human dignity." Kelly felt tears prick her eyes. The Washington Heights project had been a volunteer effort she'd worked on during weekends, using her own time and resources to help create a space for the underserved community. "That's incredible work," Dr. Miles added. "Pro bono design that prioritizes accessibility and emotional well-being. That's exactly what our industry needs more of." "Oh," Camille said, her voice tight. "How admirable. Charity work." The word charity fell from her lips like a dismissal, and Kelly felt something inside her snap. Not with anger, but with clarity. "It wasn't charity," Kelly said, her voice steady and clear. "It was investment. Those families deserved beautiful, functional spaces just as much as anyone in this room. Good design shouldn't be a luxury. It should be a right." The table fell silent, but this time it was the silence of respect rather than awkwardness. "Beautifully said," Eleanor murmured. Adrian reached over and briefly touched Kelly's hand, a gesture so quick and natural that it seemed unconscious. But the warmth of his fingers sent electricity up her arm. "That," Dr. Miles said, raising his wineglass, "is exactly the kind of thinking that's going to save our industry from itself." As the conversation shifted to other topics, Kelly felt a strange transformation happening inside her. She wasn't performing or pretending, she was simply being herself, and for the first time in a professional setting, that felt like enough. But she noticed Camille watching the interaction between her and Adrian with calculating eyes, and when dessert was served, Camille made her move. "Adrian, darling," she said, her voice carrying just far enough for the table to hear, "I've been meaning to ask about the Riverside project. I heard you might be looking for a lead designer. I have some ideas that I think would be perfect for your vision." Adrian's expression remained polite but distant. "We haven't made any decisions about the Riverside project yet." "Of course," Camille smiled, "but when you do, I hope you'll consider someone with extensive experience in high-end residential design. Projects like that require a certain level of sophistication that can't be learned from textbooks." Her eyes flicked to Kelly as she said the last part, and Kelly felt the familiar sting of being reduced to her perceived limitations. But this time, something was different. Instead of shrinking, Kelly found herself sitting straighter. "Mrs. Whitman," Kelly said quietly, her voice carrying surprising strength, "what do you think makes a design sophisticated?" Camille blinked, clearly not expecting a direct question. "Well, obviously the quality of materials, the caliber of craftspeople, the exclusivity of the concept." "I think," Kelly interrupted gently, "sophistication comes from understanding what people need to feel at home, whether that's a penthouse or a community center." She looked directly at Camille, her mother's earrings catching the candlelight. Real sophistication doesn't need to announce itself. The silence that followed was electric. "Doctor." Miles and Elena exchanged glances of obvious approval, while Adrian looked at Kelly like he was seeing her for the first time. Camille's smile had become a thin line. "How philosophical," she managed. "How true," Adrian said quietly, his eyes never leaving Kelly's face. As the evening wound down and people began to drift toward the after-party, Adrian leaned close to Kelly's ear. "Would you like to get some air?" he asked, his breath warm against her skin. Kelly nodded, suddenly needing space to process everything that had happened. As they stood to leave, she caught Camille's expression, and realized that the woman who had tried to diminish her all evening now saw her as something much more dangerous. She saw her as competition. The Metropolitan Museum's rooftop garden was a secret world floating above the chaos of Manhattan. Kelly followed Adrian through French doors that opened onto a terrace where carefully manicured gardens created intimate spaces beneath string lights that twinkled like earthbound constellations. The sounds of the party faded to a gentle hum below them, replaced by the soft whisper of evening breeze through carefully tended flowers. "I didn't even know this place existed," Kelly breathed, taking in the view of Central Park stretching out before them, the city skyline glittering beyond. "Most people don't," Adrian said, loosening his bow tie with obvious relief. "The museum only opens it for special events. I thought you might need a moment to breathe after all of that." Kelly walked to the stone balustrade, her mother's dress flowing around her like liquid midnight. The cool air felt wonderful against her skin, and for the first time all evening, she felt like she could think clearly. "Adrian," she said without turning around, "why didn't you tell me about the Architectural Digest feature?" She heard his footsteps as he moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive that somehow suited him perfectly. "Because it wasn't about me," he said simply. "That design was entirely yours. I just signed the checks." Kelly turned to look at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. In the soft light from the string lamps, Adrian looked different, younger somehow, less guarded. His green eyes seemed to hold depths she'd never noticed in the fluorescent glare of office lighting. "But your name was on the project," she protested. "My company's name," he corrected. "There's a difference. Kelly, do you know what I told the journalist when she asked about the design inspiration?" Kelly shook her head. "I told her that someone on my team had a gift for seeing what spaces could become instead of just what they were. I told her that the real architect of that project understood that great design isn't about impressing people. It's about making them feel human." Kelly felt her breath catch. "You said that?" "I did." Adrian turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart race. "Kelly, what happened down there, the way you stood up to Camille, the way you talked about dignity and design, that was extraordinary. I was just being honest." "Exactly." Adrian stepped closer, and Kelly could see the way the city lights reflected in his eyes. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? People spend so much energy being who they think they should be that they forget who they actually are." A gentle breeze stirred Kelly's curls, and without thinking, Adrian reached out to tuck a strand behind her ear, the same gesture from earlier, but somehow more intimate in the privacy of the garden. "You never do that," he said softly, his hand lingering near her face. "You're always authentically yourself. It's been driving me crazy for 2 years." Kelly's heart hammered against her ribs. "Driving you crazy?" Adrian laughed, a sound she'd never heard from him before, warm and slightly nervous. "Kelly, I've been trying to find excuses to spend time with you since your first week. Why do you think I always need coffee at exactly the same time you're making your afternoon rounds? Why do you think I ask for your opinion on projects that have nothing to do with your job?" Kelly stared at him, her mind reeling. I thought you were just being a good boss." "I was trying to be a professional boss while dealing with very unprofessional feelings," Adrian admitted, his voice rough with honesty. "Do you know what it's like to look forward to Monday mornings because it means seeing you again?" The admission hung between them in the soft night air. Kelly felt like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful. "Adrian," she whispered, "I don't understand." "What don't you understand?" "You could have anyone. You're successful, brilliant, gorgeous—" She stopped, realizing what she'd just said, heat flooding her cheeks. Adrian's smile was soft and devastating. "You think I'm gorgeous? That's not the point," Kelly said, flustered. "The point is that you move in circles with women like Camille, sophisticated, polished, from your world." "My world," Adrian repeated, and there was something almost bitter in his voice. "Kelly, my world is full of people who see dollar signs when they look at me, who calculate the value of every conversation, every smile, every invitation." He moved closer, close enough that Kelly could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Do you know what you did the first day you started working for me?" Kelly shook her head, mesmerized by the intensity in his voice. "You brought me coffee, not because I asked for it, but because you noticed I looked tired, and when I said thank you, you smiled. Not the practiced smile I get from everyone else, but a real smile that reached your eyes, and I thought, when was the last time someone did something kind for me without wanting anything in return?" Kelly felt tears prick her eyes. "Adrian, you see me, Kelly. Not the CEO, not the bank account, not the connections I can provide. You see me, and I've been half in love with you since that first cup of coffee. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything Kelly thought she knew about her life, her place in his world, her own possibilities. Half in love? She managed to whisper. Adrian's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. The other half happened tonight, he said, when I watched you stand up to Camille with more grace and dignity than I've seen from anyone in years. When I realized that you're not just beautiful, you're brave. Kelly leaned into his touch, closing her eyes against the overwhelming rush of emotion. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of this. Of what it means. Of not being enough for your world. Kelly. Adrian's voice was firm, commanding her attention. Look at me. She opened her eyes and found herself drowning in green depths that seemed to see straight through her soul. You're not entering my world, he said. You're creating a new one where authenticity matters more than artifice, where kindness is valued over connections, where someone can be elegant in a vintage dress because elegance comes from within. Before Kelly could respond, the sound of voices drifted up from the terrace below. Other guests had discovered the garden. Adrian dropped his hand, stepping back with obvious reluctance. We should go back inside before people start talking. Let them talk, Kelly said, surprising herself with her boldness. Adrian's eyes widened. Kelly, I'm tired of being careful, she said, her voice stronger now. I'm tired of making myself smaller, so other people feel comfortable. You said I was brave tonight. Maybe it's time I started believing it. The voices were getting closer, but for a moment, Adrian and Kelly stood frozen in their bubble of honesty and possibility. This changes everything, Adrian said quietly. I know. There's no going back. I don't want to go back. Adrian's smile was soft and full of promise. Then we move forward, together. As the first of the other guests emerged onto the terrace, Adrian offered Kelly his arm with a formality that belied the intimacy of what had just passed between them. But as they walked back toward the lights and laughter, Kelly caught sight of Camille watching them from the doorway, her expression unreadable in the shadows. And Kelly realized that their private moment might not have been as private as they'd thought. The after-party had moved to the museum's Egyptian wing, where ancient artifacts cast mysterious shadows in the dim lighting. Kelly moved through the crowd with newfound confidence, Adrian's words still echoing in her mind. You're not entering my world. You're creating a new one. The weight of his confession had settled into something warm and powerful in her chest, a steady reminder that she was exactly where she belonged. Kelly! Dr. Miles appeared at her elbow with a genuine smile. I've been telling everyone about your Washington Heights project. Margaret Sinclair over there, he gestured toward a distinguished woman in her 60s, runs the city's affordable housing initiative. She's very interested in meeting you. Before Kelly could respond, Adrian materialized beside them, 2 champagne flutes in hand. He offered one to Kelly, and their fingers brushed as she accepted it, sending a familiar thrill up her arm. Margaret Sinclair, Adrian asked. She's brilliant. Kelly, you should definitely talk to her. I should warn you, Dr. Miles said with a chuckle. Margaret doesn't suffer fools, but she appreciates innovative thinking. I have a feeling you two will get along famously. As Dr. Miles led them toward Margaret, Kelly felt a hand on her arm. Excuse me. Camille's voice was honey-sweet, but her grip was firm. Kelly, could I steal you for just a moment? Girl talk. Adrian frowned. Camille, we were just... Oh, this will only take a second, Camille said with that practiced smile. You understand, don't you? Sometimes we ladies need to powder our noses together. Kelly felt a chill run down her spine, but she nodded. Of course. I'll be right back, she told Adrian, squeezing his hand briefly. Camille led her to a quieter corner near a massive sarcophagus, where the ambient party noise faded to a distant hum. You know, Camille said, her voice dropping its artificial sweetness. I have to admit I underestimated you tonight. Kelly remained silent, every instinct telling her to be careful. When Adrian first brought you, Camille continued, circling Kelly like a predator, I thought you were just another naive girl who'd developed a crush on her boss. But watching you tonight, the way you've positioned yourself, the way you've managed to charm everyone, I realize you're much more calculating than you appear. I'm sorry. Kelly kept her voice steady despite the accusation in Camille's tone. Oh, please. Camille's laugh was sharp. The sweet, innocent act is very good, but we both know what's really happening here. The struggling assistant, the vintage dress, the touching backstory about your mother, it's quite the performance. Kelly felt heat rise in her cheeks. It's not a performance, it's my life. Your life, Camille repeated mockingly. Tell me, Kelly, what's your endgame here? Marriage to Adrian? A promotion you haven't earned? Access to his social circle? You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Camille stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I saw you two on the terrace, very intimate, very unprofessional. Kelly's blood ran cold. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. You're an employee having an inappropriate relationship with your boss. That's grounds for termination, isn't it? Not to mention career suicide in our industry. Kelly felt the familiar squeeze of panic in her chest, but this time something else rose alongside it. Anger. And what would you gain from that information? Camille's smile was predatory. Clarity. Adrian's been distracted lately, making questionable decisions. Bringing staff to professional events, for instance. Someone needs to help him refocus on what's important. You mean yourself. I mean his career, his reputation, the company he's built. Camille's voice took on a tone of false concern. Kelly, you seem like a sweet girl, but you're out of your depth here. Do you really think a relationship with Adrian ends well for you? Look around. This is his world. These are his people. What happens when the novelty wears off and he realizes what he's risking for... What? A pretty face and a sob story? Each word hit like a physical blow, but Kelly forced herself to stand straight. You're wrong about me, she said quietly. Am I? Then prove it. Camille's eyes glittered with malice. Walk away tonight. Save both of you the inevitable heartbreak and scandal. Adrian will thank you eventually. And if I don't? Camille shrugged elegantly. Then I'll have to consider my options. For Adrian's sake, of course. I'm sure Patricia Wilson would be very interested to know about the special attention you've been receiving. And the board of directors takes workplace relationships very seriously, especially when there's such a significant power imbalance. Kelly felt the room spinning slightly. She thought about Adrian's confession, about the warmth in his eyes, about the possibility of something real and beautiful that she'd never allowed herself to imagine. I need to think, she managed. Of course you do. Camille's smile was triumphant. But don't take too long. These things have a way of getting complicated when they drag on. As Camille glided away, Kelly stood frozen among the ancient artifacts, feeling like her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. There you are! Adrian appeared at her side, his face creased with concern. You look pale. What did Camille say to you? Kelly looked up at him. This brilliant, successful, beautiful man who had just told her he was in love with her, and felt the weight of reality crushing down on her chest. Adrian, she said quietly, maybe we should talk. Of course, what's wrong? Kelly glanced around the party, at the elegant people in their expensive clothes, at the world she'd been trying to convince herself she could belong to. Not here, she said. Tomorrow, at the office. Adrian's expression grew more concerned. Kelly, you're scaring me. What happened? Before she could answer, Dr. Miles appeared with Margaret Sinclair in tow. Kelly, there you are. Margaret is absolutely fascinated by your community design work. Margaret Sinclair was exactly as formidable as Dr. Miles had suggested, tall, silver-haired, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. Miss Carter, Margaret said, extending her hand. Harrison tells me you have some innovative ideas about affordable housing design. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Kelly looked between Margaret's expectant face, Adrian's worried expression, and Camille's satisfied smile from across the room. The opportunity she'd dreamed of was standing right in front of her, but all she could hear was Camille's voice. What happens when the novelty wears off? Kelly's voice cracked slightly. I'm honored to meet you, Mrs. Sinclair, but I'm not feeling well. Perhaps we could talk another time. Margaret's eyebrows rose with surprise, but her expression remained kind. Of course, dear. Harrison has your contact information. I'll be in touch. As Margaret and Dr. Miles moved away, Adrian stepped closer to Kelly. We're leaving, he said firmly. Now. No, you should stay. Network. These are your people. Kelly. Adrian's voice was soft but commanding. Look at me. She met his eyes, and the concern there almost broke her resolve. Whatever Camille said to you, whatever she threatened, we'll figure it out together, okay? Kelly nodded, but inside her heart was breaking. Because she was starting to realize that maybe Camille was right about one thing. Sometimes loving someone meant protecting them from yourself. And as Adrian guided her toward the exit, Kelly caught one last glimpse of Camille, watching them, with the satisfied expression of someone who had just played the winning hand. Kelly sat in her apartment at 3 in the morning, still wearing her mother's dress, staring at her phone. 27 missed calls from Mia. 12 text messages ranging from excited, "How was it? Tell me everything," to concerned, "Kelly, you're scaring me. Please call back." And one message from James, the driver, "I hope the evening ended as beautifully as it began, Miss Carter." But Kelly couldn't bring herself to call anyone back. Instead, she sat curled in her reading chair, watching the city lights blur through tears she refused to let fall. Camille's words played on repeat in her mind. What happens when the novelty wears off and he realizes what he's risking? Kelly pulled out her laptop and did something she'd never done before. She Googled Adrian Sturt. Page after page of images filled her screen. Adrian at charity galas with Manhattan's elite. Adrian receiving awards for architectural innovation. Adrian photographed with beautiful, accomplished women at various social events. And there, in a society page from 6 months ago, was Adrian with Camille at some fundraiser, her hand possessively on his arm, both of them looking like they belonged in the same magazine spread. Kelly slammed the laptop shut, but the images were burned into her mind. She walked to her bedroom mirror and looked at herself honestly for the first time all night. The navy dress that had felt so perfect hours ago now seemed shabby compared to the designer gowns she'd seen. Her simple gold jewelry looked cheap next to the diamonds and pearls that had sparkled under the museum's lights. Her natural hair, which had felt elegant and authentic, now seemed unsophisticated compared to the elaborately styled updos of Adrian's usual social circle. Who am I kidding, she thought. I'm a girl from Brooklyn who works as an assistant. He's Adrian Sturt. Her phone rang, startling her from her spiral of self-doubt. Adrian's name flashed on the screen. Kelly stared at it, letting it ring, then ring again. By the third call, she finally answered. "Hello? Kelly, thank God. I've been worried sick. You left so quickly after we got back from the museum, and you seemed different." His voice was soft, concerned, and it made her heart ache. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just tired." Kelly. There was something in the way he said her name, gentle but knowing. "Talk to me. What did Camille say to you?" Kelly closed her eyes, fighting the urge to tell him everything, to let him help her figure out how to navigate Camille's threats, how to protect both their careers, how to make this impossible situation work. But then she remembered the look of satisfaction on Camille's face, the calculated cruelty in her voice, and she realized something that made her blood run cold. Camille was right about the power imbalance. Kelly was an assistant. Adrian was the CEO. If their relationship became public, who would people believe initiated it? Who would be seen as the one with ulterior motives? She made me realize some things, Kelly said carefully. "What things?" Kelly took a shaky breath. "Adrian, what we talked about tonight, what happened between us, maybe we should think about it more carefully." Silence on the other end of the line. "Kelly," Adrian said finally, his voice very quiet, "are you having second thoughts about us?" "Us." The word hung in the air like a promise and a threat all at once. "I'm having realistic thoughts," Kelly said, hating how the words tasted in her mouth. "Adrian, you saw what happened tonight. The way people looked at me, the comments about my dress, my background. I don't belong in your world." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Kelly's voice cracked despite her efforts to stay strong. "You're Adrian Sturt. You build dreams for millionaires and shape the skyline of Manhattan. I organize your calendar and make your coffee. We live in completely different universes." "Kelly, listen to me." "No, you listen to me." Kelly stood up, pacing her small living room. "What happens to us at work on Monday? Do we pretend nothing happened? Do we try to navigate a relationship where you're my boss and I'm your employee? What happens when the board finds out? What happens when clients start questioning your judgment because you're involved with your assistant? We'll figure it out." "How?" Kelly's voice rose despite herself. "Adrian, I can't be the reason your company gets hurt. I can't be the scandal that follows you around for the rest of your career. And I can't be the charity case you tried to save." "Charity case?" Adrian's voice was sharp now. "Kelly, is that really what you think this is?" Kelly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I think tonight was beautiful and magical and everything I never let myself dream about. But I also think that fairy tales don't exist in real life. So that's it? You're giving up?" "I'm being practical. You're being afraid." The accusation hit like a slap, and Kelly felt her careful composure cracking. "Of course I'm afraid," she shouted. "I'm terrified. Do you know what it feels like to have someone like Camille look at you like you're something that crawled out from under a rock? Do you know what it's like to realize that everyone at that party sees you as Adrian Sturt's charity project? That's not how I see you. But it's how they see me, and eventually it's how you'll see me too. Kelly, I need some time to think, Kelly said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, just give me some space to figure this out. Another long silence. Okay, Adrian said finally, but Kelly, whatever Camille said to you, whatever she threatened, she's wrong. About you, about us, about everything. Don't let her win. After he hung up, Kelly sat in her darkened apartment and cried for the first time since her mother's funeral. She cried for the dream she'd allowed herself to believe in for exactly one perfect evening. She cried for the man who saw her as beautiful when she felt ordinary. And she cried for the impossible choice between love and survival that no one should ever have to make. Outside her window, Manhattan glittered with a million possibilities, but Kelly had never felt more alone. The next morning, Kelly called in sick to work. She spent the day walking through Prospect Park, her mother's dress hanging carefully in her closet like a memory of magic. She thought about Mia's words, "You're carrying every woman in our family who ever had to prove she belonged somewhere." She thought about her mother's strength, her grandmother's resilience, her own dreams that she'd worked so hard to achieve. And she realized that somewhere between Camille's threats and her own fears, she'd forgotten the most important thing her mother had ever taught her. True strength wasn't about proving you belonged. It was about knowing you were worthy of belonging, regardless of what anyone else thought. But knowing that and living it were two very different things. As the sun set over Brooklyn, Kelly made a decision that would change everything. She was going to resign. Kelly stood outside the Sturt Interiors building at 7:30 Monday morning, her resignation letter folded neatly in her purse. She'd written it 17 times over the weekend, each version trying to capture professionalism while hiding the heartbreak underneath. The final version was simple. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as executive assistant. Thank you for the opportunity to grow professionally. This decision is in the best interest of both myself and the company. Clean, professional, final. She deliberately arrived early, hoping to slip in, leave the letter on Adrian's desk, and pack her things before anyone else arrived. But as she approached the elevator, she heard familiar voices coming from the lobby coffee shop. I'm telling you, Patricia, it was completely inappropriate. Camille's voice carried clearly across the marble space, bringing staff to professional events, the obvious favoritism. It's unprofessional at best. Kelly ducked behind a pillar, her heart racing. I've noticed the special treatment too. Patricia's voice was sharp with agreement. Extended lunch breaks, private meetings, that ridiculous office renovation project she somehow got approved. It's been obvious for months. The poor girl probably thinks she has a real chance with him, Camille continued with false sympathy. Someone should really tell her that men like Adrian don't end up with their assistants. Not permanently. Kelly felt nauseous. This was exactly what she'd feared. Her relationship with Adrian becoming office gossip, her professional reputation being destroyed. What are you going to do about it? Patricia asked. I'm considering my options. For the good of the company, of course. Adrian's been so distracted lately, and this situation isn't helping his judgment. Kelly had heard enough. She was about to slip away when another voice joined the conversation. Excuse me, ladies? Kelly's breath caught. Marcus. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation, Marcus continued, his voice carrying that particular edge he got when he was professionally furious. And I have to say, I'm disappointed. Marcus, Patricia said dismissively, this doesn't concern you. Actually, it does. Kelly Carter is one of the most professional, competent, and ethical people I've ever worked with. The fact that you're sitting here gossiping about her like a couple of high school students is frankly embarrassing. We're not gossiping, Camille said coldly. We're expressing legitimate concerns about workplace appropriateness. Are you? Marcus's voice got dangerously quiet. Because it sounds to me like you're threatened by a woman who's more talented and authentic than either of you will ever be. Kelly pressed herself closer to the pillar, tears stinging her eyes. That's enough, Patricia snapped. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know that Kelly single-handedly saved the Morrison account when you bungled the client relations. I know that her design suggestions have been featured in Architectural Digest, while you've been taking credit for other people's work for years. And I know that Adrian Sturt is smart enough to recognize genuine talent when he sees it. There was a moment of stunned silence. And frankly, Marcus continued, if Adrian is developing feelings for Kelly, It's probably because she's the first real person he's met in years, unlike some people who throw themselves at him at every charity event. Kelly heard the sharp intake of breath from Camille. How dare you? No, how dare you? Kelly is twice the professional you are, and if you can't see that, it's because you're too busy being jealous to recognize excellence. Kelly heard footsteps, someone walking away in anger. Then Marcus's voice again, gentler now. Patricia, I've worked here for 3 years. I've never seen Adrian happier or more creative than he's been since Kelly started working closely with him. Maybe instead of tearing down one of the few good people in this industry, you should ask yourself why that threatens you so much. More footsteps, then silence. Kelly slumped against the pillar, her resignation letter crumpled in her shaking hands. Marcus had just risked his own career defending her. He'd seen something she'd been too afraid to see, that maybe she wasn't the problem here. Kelly? She spun around to find Marcus standing behind her, 2 coffee cups in his hands and a knowing look on his face. How long have you been there? He asked gently. Long enough, Kelly whispered. Marcus handed her a coffee and leaned against the pillar beside her. You know, eavesdropping is generally considered rude. Despite everything, Kelly found herself smiling slightly. So is gossiping about your co-workers. True. Marcus studied her face with concern. Kelly, please tell me you're not about to do something stupid. Kelly looked down at the crumpled resignation letter in her hand. Define stupid. Oh, honey. Marcus shook his head. You were going to quit, weren't you? Kelly nodded, not trusting her voice. Because of what Camille said to you at the gala? Kelly looked up in surprise. How did you? Because I know Camille Whitman. She's been trying to sink her claws into Adrian for years, and she sees you as a threat. Which, by the way, you absolutely are. Marcus, I'm not... Kelly. Marcus turned to face her fully. I watched Adrian's face when he talked about you this weekend. I've never seen him look at anyone like that, and I watched your face Friday night when he complimented your work. You love him. It wasn't a question. It doesn't matter, Kelly said quietly. Even if that's true, it doesn't change the reality of the situation. I'm his assistant. He's Adrian Sturt. People will always see me as what? The brilliant woman who transformed his workspace, saved major client relationships, and somehow managed to make the most driven workaholic in Manhattan remember to smile? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Kelly, if people have a problem with that, it says more about them than it does about you. Kelly felt her carefully constructed resolve wavering. But what if she's right? What if I am just a novelty to him? What if... Stop! Marcus held up a hand. Kelly, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. On Friday afternoon, Adrian called me into his office. He wanted to know what you liked. Flowers, music, books, everything. He was nervous. Adrian Sturt, who negotiates million-dollar deals before breakfast, was nervous about whether you'd enjoy the gala. Kelly's breath caught. He asked me 3 times if I thought you'd feel comfortable, if there was anything he could do to make the evening easier for you. And when I asked him why it mattered so much, do you know what he said? Kelly shook her head. He said, because she matters to me more than I've let myself admit, and I'm terrified of messing this up. Tears spilled down Kelly's cheeks before she could stop them. Kelly, Marcus said gently, that man is head over heels in love with you, and from what I've seen, you feel the same way. Don't let Camille Whitman's jealousy rob you of something real. Kelly looked down at her resignation letter, then slowly tore it in half. What if I'm not strong enough for this? Honey, you've been strong enough for everything else. You put yourself through college. You've thrived in a competitive industry. You've handled impossible clients and impossible deadlines with grace. You think falling in love is going to be what breaks you. Kelly wiped her eyes and looked up at the building, where Adrian was probably already at work, probably wondering if she was going to walk away from him forever. What do I do? Marcus smiled. You go upstairs, you apologize for making him worry, and you fight for what you want, because I guarantee you he's up there right now figuring out how to fight for you. As if summoned by Marcus's words, Kelly's phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. I know you need space, but please know that whatever we're facing, we don't have to face it alone. I'm here when you're ready. Kelly looked at the message, then at Marcus, then at the building that held her future. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, Marcus said. Being scared means it matters. Now go get your man before I have to listen to him mope around the office for another day. Kelly took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the elevator. It was time to stop running from her own happiness. Kelly stepped off the elevator to find the office buzzing with unusual energy. Adrian's door was closed, but she could see him through the glass walls, pacing behind his desk with his phone pressed to his ear. Patricia sat at her workstation, typing furiously while stealing glances toward Adrian's office. And there in the center reception area, like she owned the place, sat Camille Whitman. Kelly's steps faltered. Camille was dressed impeccably in a cream-colored suit, her platinum hair swept into a perfect chignon, looking every inch the successful businesswoman. She was reviewing what appeared to be a contract, her manicured fingers drumming against the glass table. "Kelly," Marcus appeared at her side, his voice carefully neutral but his eyes warning. "I didn't expect to see you today." "Why is she here?" Kelly whispered, nodding toward Camille. "She has a meeting with Adrian about the Riverside project," Marcus said quietly. "She's been here since 8 a.m. Kelly felt her newly found courage wavering. Of course, while she'd been having her crisis of confidence, Camille had been moving forward with her professional relationship with Adrian. "Kelly," Patricia's voice cut through the ambient office noise, "Adrian's been looking for you. He asked me to send you in the moment you arrived." All eyes in the office turned toward Kelly. She could feel the weight of speculation, the undercurrent of gossip that Marcus had interrupted that morning. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward Adrian's office. Through the glass, she could see him end his phone call abruptly when he spotted her. Their eyes met, and the relief on his face was so profound it nearly took her breath away. Kelly knocked softly and entered. "Close the door," Adrian said immediately, his voice rough with emotion. As soon as the door clicked shut, Adrian was moving toward her, his hands reaching for hers. "Kelly, thank God. I was terrified you weren't coming back. When you didn't answer my calls yesterday—" "I'm sorry," Kelly interrupted. "I needed time to think." "And?" Adrian searched her face desperately. "What did you decide?" Before Kelly could answer, there was a sharp knock on the door. Through the glass, they could see Camille standing outside, her expression unreadable. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Not now, Camille." But Camille was already opening the door. "Adrian, darling, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we really do need to finalize the Riverside contracts." Her eyes flicked to Kelly with cold satisfaction. "Hello, Kelly. I'm surprised to see you here." "Camille," Adrian's voice carried a warning. "Kelly and I are having a private conversation." "Of course you are." Camille's smile was sharp as a blade. "But surely business comes first. The Riverside project is worth $12 million, Adrian. Much more important than personal matters." Kelly felt the familiar squeeze of inadequacy, but this time something else rose with it. Anger. Pure, righteous anger at this woman who thought she could manipulate people's lives like chess pieces. "Actually," Kelly said, her voice steady and clear, "I think personal matters are exactly what we need to discuss." Both Adrian and Camille looked at her in surprise. "Kelly," Camille said with false sweetness, "perhaps this isn't the best time." "No, I think this is the perfect time." Kelly stepped closer to Camille, her spine straight and her voice unwavering. "Because I think we need to be very clear about what's happening here." "Kelly," Adrian said quietly, "you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Kelly turned to include Adrian in her words, but her eyes remained fixed on Camille. "Because someone needs to call this what it is." Camille's composure cracked slightly. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it directly." Kelly's voice grew stronger with each word. "You've spent the last few days trying to convince me that I don't belong in Adrian's world, that I'm not sophisticated enough, not polished enough, not good enough for someone like him." "Kelly," Adrian started, but Kelly held up a hand. "You tried to make me believe that loving him was selfish, that I would damage his reputation, that I was just a novelty that would eventually wear off." Kelly took another step toward Camille. "But you know what I realized?" Camille's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I realized that everything you said about me was actually about you. You're the one who sees relationships as transactions. You're the one who thinks love is about status and social climbing. You're the one who believes people are only valuable for what they can provide. How dare you—" "I'm not finished." Kelly's voice cut through Camille's protest like steel. "You called me a charity case, but the truth is, you're the one who's desperate. You're the one who's been throwing yourself at a man who's never shown you anything more than professional courtesy. You're the one who's so threatened by authentic connection that you have to try to destroy it." The office outside had gone completely silent. Through the glass walls, Kelly could see Patricia, Marcus, and several other colleagues watching the scene unfold. Camille's face was flushed with rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about, you little—" "I know exactly what I'm talking about." Kelly's voice remained steady, but her eyes blazed with conviction. "I know that Adrian sees me, really sees me, not because of what I can do for his career or his image, but because of who I am. And I know that terrifies you. Because you've spent so much time being who you think you should be that you've forgotten who you actually are. Adrian was staring at Kelly like he'd never seen her before, his expression a mixture of awe and pride. You want to know the difference between us, Camille? Kelly continued. I wore my mother's dress to that gala, a simple vintage dress that meant something to me. You wore a designer gown that cost more than most people make in a month. But when Adrian looked at me, he saw elegance. When he looks at you, he sees expensive fabric. Camille's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. And that, Kelly said, her voice soft but implacable, is why you'll never have what we have, because love isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. For a moment, the office was completely silent. Then Camille grabbed her purse from the chair where she'd left it. This is ridiculous, she snapped, but her voice lacked its earlier venom. Adrian, when you're ready to discuss business like a professional, you know where to find me. She turned on her heel and stalked toward the door, but Kelly's voice stopped her. Camille. The older woman turned back, her expression murderous. The Riverside Project? Kelly smiled, and for the first time, it was the smile of a woman who knew exactly who she was. Adrian already told me he's giving it to Harrison Miles's firm. He made that decision on Friday. Camille's face went white. Without another word, she fled the office. In the silence that followed, Kelly could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Through the glass walls, she saw Marcus giving her a thumbs up and Patricia looking like she'd swallowed something unpleasant. Kelly. Adrian's voice was soft, wondering. She turned to face him, suddenly nervous now that the adrenaline was fading. That was... Adrian shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. That was the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed. I probably just made a lot of enemies. You made it clear that you're not going anywhere. Adrian stepped closer, his eyes intense. Kelly, what changed? Yesterday you were ready to walk away from this, from us. Kelly thought about Marcus's words, about her mother's memory, about the dress that had carried her through the most important night of her life. I remembered something my mother used to tell me, she said quietly. She said that real strength isn't about proving you belong somewhere. It's about knowing you're worthy of belonging, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Adrian reached out and cupped her face in his hands. And are you? Worthy of belonging? Kelly looked into his green eyes, eyes that had seen her at her most vulnerable and her most fierce, eyes that had never looked at her with anything less than respect and admiration. With you? She said, her voice strong and certain. Yes, I am. Adrian's smile was radiant. Then there's something I need to ask you. What? He dropped his hands from her face and, to Kelly's complete shock, went down on one knee. Kelly Carter, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the glass walls to the entire office. I've been trying to find the courage to do this since the moment you told Camille that love is about being real. Kelly's hands flew to her mouth as Adrian pulled out a small velvet box. I don't want to wait for someday or maybe or when things are perfect. I want to build a life with you, a real life with real love, where being authentic is more valuable than being polished. Tears streamed down Kelly's face as Adrian opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant solitaire diamond. Will you marry me? Through the glass, Kelly could see the entire office holding its breath. Marcus was grinning like a maniac, and even Patricia looked stunned into something approaching approval. Kelly looked down at Adrian, this brilliant, successful, beautiful man who saw her exactly as she was and loved her for it. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. As Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, the office erupted in applause. And Kelly realized that sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen not when you change who you are, but when you finally have the courage to be exactly who you've always been. The dress that had belonged to her mother had carried her to this moment, this perfect, impossible, absolutely real moment where love conquered fear and authenticity triumphed over artifice. And she had never felt more beautiful in her life. 2 years later, Kelly stood in front of the floor-length mirror in the bridal suite at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, her hands smoothing over the ivory silk of her wedding dress. It was nothing like her mother's navy dress. This one was modern, elegant, with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that caught the morning light beautifully. But around her neck, she wore her mother's gold chain, and in her ears, the same small hoops that had carried her through that first transformative night. Stop fidgeting, Mia commanded from behind her, adjusting the simple veil that Kelly had chosen. You look absolutely stunning. She's right, said Elena Rodriguez, who had become one of Kelly's closest friends and business partners. Adrian's going to forget how to breathe when he sees you. Kelly smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. After the confrontation with Camille 2 years ago, everything had changed, but not in the ways she'd feared. Adrian had been true to his word about facing everything together. When the board of directors had questions about their relationship, Adrian had addressed them directly and professionally. When industry gossips had tried to reduce Kelly to the assistant who caught the boss, Adrian had made sure everyone knew about her credentials, her projects, and her independent success, because Kelly had stopped hiding her light. 6 months after their engagement, she'd left Sturt Interiors, not because of scandal or pressure, but because she'd finally found the courage to start her own firm. Carter Design specialized in creating beautiful, functional spaces for communities that had been overlooked by traditional interior design. Her first major project had been a complete renovation of the Washington Heights Community Center, funded by an anonymous donor who turned out to be Adrian. He said he wanted to invest in dreams, Kelly had told Mia when she'd found out. Apparently, I'm his favorite dream. Now Carter Design had a full client list, 3 employees, and a reputation for creating spaces that honored both beauty and humanity. Kelly had found her place in New York's design world, not as Adrian's assistant or his wife-to-be, but as Kelly Carter, architect of spaces that mattered. 5 minutes, Marcus announced, poking his head into the bridal suite. As Adrian's best man and Kelly's closest friend, he'd been running between the bride and groom all morning. And Kelly, Adrian looks like he's about to vibrate out of his skin. I think he's more nervous than you are. Kelly laughed. Tell him I'll be worth the wait. I think he already knows that, Marcus said with a grin, but I'll remind him anyway. As her friends made final adjustments to her dress and veil, Kelly thought about the conversation she'd had with Adrian the night before. Are you sure about this? She'd asked him as they'd walked through Prospect Park, the same route she'd taken when she'd considered quitting 2 years ago. About marrying you? Adrian had looked at her like she'd asked if he was sure the sky was blue. Kelly, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I mean about everything. The media attention, the society pages, having a wife who designs community centers instead of penthouse suites. Adrian had stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Do you know what the society pages said about us last month? He'd asked. Kelly had shaken her head. They called us Manhattan's most authentic power couple. They said we represent a new kind of success, one that values substance over status. Adrian had smiled. They said you're changing the conversation about what it means to belong in high society. And how do you feel about that? I feel like I'm the luckiest man alive, Adrian had said simply, because I get to spend my life with a woman who doesn't just design beautiful spaces, she creates belonging for people who thought they'd never have it. Now, standing in her wedding dress, Kelly felt the truth of that in her bones. She belonged here, in this moment, in this life she'd built with courage and authenticity. Ready? Mia asked, offering Kelly her bouquet, a simple arrangement of white roses and eucalyptus that perfectly matched the elegant simplicity of the day. Kelly took one last look in the mirror and saw her mother's daughter looking back, strong, confident, and radiant with love. I'm ready. The ceremony was held in the garden's rose arbor, with the Manhattan skyline glittering in the distance like a backdrop of possibilities. As Kelly walked down the aisle, accompanied by Mia and escorted by Dr. Miles, who had become like a father to her, she saw the faces of everyone who had supported their love story. Marcus beaming with pride, Eleanor and her daughter, who had insisted on being the flower girl, James, Adrian's driver, who'd been given the honor of officiating the ceremony. Even Patricia, who had eventually come around and now sent Kelly referrals for her design business. But Kelly only had eyes for Adrian. He stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his green eyes bright with unshed tears. When their gazes met, his face transformed into a smile so radiant that several people in the audience sighed audibly. You look, Adrian said when she reached him, his voice just loud enough for her to hear, like every dream I never dared to have. You look like home, Kelly whispered back. James cleared his throat, smiling at the couple before him. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the marriage of 2 people who have shown us that the most beautiful love stories are built on a foundation of authenticity, respect, and the courage to be exactly who you are. As they exchanged vows they'd written themselves, Kelly spoke about the night Adrian had first seen her truly, not as his assistant, but as a woman worthy of love and respect. Adrian spoke about the morning Kelly had stood up to Camille, when he'd realized that courage wasn't about never being afraid, but about loving someone enough to be brave. When James pronounced them husband and wife, and Adrian kissed her under the rose arbor, the applause from their guests mixed with the distant sounds of Brooklyn, children playing, couples walking, life continuing in all its messy, beautiful authenticity. At the reception, held in the garden's conservatory, Kelly danced with her new husband to a string quartet's version of At Last, the same song her parents had danced to at their wedding. "Mrs. Sturt," Adrian murmured against her ear as they swayed together. "How does it feel?" Kelly pulled back to look at him. This man who had seen her potential before she'd seen it herself, who had loved her exactly as she was, while encouraging her to become everything she could be. "It feels like coming home," she said. "It feels like belonging." "You know what the best part is?" Adrian asked. "What?" "This is just the beginning." As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, Kelly found herself standing on the conservatory's terrace, looking out at the city where she'd built her dreams. Mia appeared beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "So," Mia said, settling next to her sister, "was it everything you hoped for?" Kelly thought about the scared young woman who had almost resigned 2 years ago, who had believed she wasn't good enough for a man like Adrian Sturt. She thought about the dress that had carried her mother's courage and her own growing strength. She thought about the moment she'd stopped apologizing for who she was and started celebrating it instead. "It was better," Kelly said finally, "because I never let myself hope for something this real." "Mama would be so proud," Mia said softly. "She is proud," Kelly corrected, touching the gold chain at her throat. "I can feel it." As they stood together, watching the lights of Manhattan twinkle like earthbound stars, Adrian appeared behind them. "Ladies," he said, offering his arm to Kelly, "our car is ready." Kelly turned to embrace her sister, holding her tight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." "That's what family does," Mia said. "Now go start your happily ever after." As Kelly and Adrian walked toward their car, the same one James had driven her to the Metropolitan Gala 2 years ago, Kelly felt the weight of the future settling around her shoulders like a comfortable embrace. Tomorrow they would fly to Italy for their honeymoon. Next month, Carter Design would break ground on their biggest project yet, an affordable housing complex that prioritized both beauty and humanity. Next year, who knew what dreams they'd build together? But tonight, as Adrian helped her into the car and James smiled at them in the rearview mirror, Kelly Carter Sturt knew one thing with absolute certainty. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen not when you change who you are, but when you finally find the courage to be exactly who you've always been. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone sees that courage and falls in love with it. Reflection, question for viewers. Looking at Kelly's journey from hiding her light to boldly shining it, what dreams have you been afraid to pursue because you worried you weren't enough? What would happen if you chose courage over comfort? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.